So my Haftarah portion today is 1 Kings 5:26 through 6:13. And essentially it follows Solomon building the temple, and it kind of gives the instructions and details that God gave to Solomon. So one of the first things that impressed me was just Solomon's heart and attitude when building the temple. So he goes about it with a lot of humility, and I think he recognized the importance of it. So this is God ordained the building of the temple. It's a task he had for Solomon. And so Solomon asks for wisdom on how to build it, and he seeks out God's will for this project throughout every step of it. And Solomon builds the temple for God's glory and not his own. Another thing I found interesting is that Solomon is fulfilling a promise by building the temple. David had originally wanted to build the temple, but God promised his son to build it. David was not allowed to build the temple because he was a warring king, and God wanted his temple to be built in a time of peace, not during a time of war. So I really see this as God wanted his temple to be pure, and he wanted it to be built in the right order at the right time. And this isn't to say that David's actions were bad or disobedient, but it's just God had a specific plan and task for David, and he had a specific plan and task for Solomon. So Solomon used over 30,000 Israelites to build the temple, and even in the way he did that, it was very humane. He would have like 10,000 Israelites go to work on the temple for like a month at a time, and then he would rotate them out with another 10,000. So he wasn't ripping them away from his family for like months at a time. And the building of the temple was also very detailed, and God had specific instructions on how to build every part of it. Everything from the outside to the inside to like every piece of furniture and article. He had specific measurements for it. He had a specific material picked out for it. And it was all like beautifully made and very expensive. So again, this shows that God is in the details. He cares about the beauty and the purity of his temple. So 1 Kings 6:7 says, in building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. So this verse was really interesting to me, and I see this verse as another example of purity. These building blocks had to be perfect to be used for the temple. Each block had to fit perfectly into place. So this portion ends with this instruction to Solomon. As for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, observe my laws, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. This is a pretty powerful promise to Solomon, but it's also kind of a warning. What happens when Israel is not obeying God's commands, and we see what does happen later to them. But I really like that last part of the verse that talks about how God will come and dwell with them, and we do see it fulfilled in 1 Kings 8 and during the Feast of Sukkot, which that's just kind of a cool connection. The Ark of the Covenant is brought into the temple, and all of Israel offers sacrifices to the Lord. So they were already all in Jerusalem celebrating Sukkot, and so Solomon takes this time to make covenant with God and dedicates the temple. And so as soon as the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the temple, the glory of God fills the temple in a cloud. It comes down, and 1 Kings 8 says it's so powerful that everyone in the temple had to leave just because of the presence. This is the fulfillment that he's coming to, he is dwelling among them. I think that's cool. So we do see, though, that later, because of Israel's wickedness, they broke their promise. They broke that covenant with the Lord, and his presence left the temple. And just like how it came down in a cloud, it says it rises up and then leaves, in which that must have been pretty scary for the Israelites. I'm sure they knew they messed up at that point when they saw it. And so we do know the temple is eventually destroyed. So how does this connect to the Torah portion? This week's Torah portion is Terumah, or contribution, which follows the building of the tabernacle. So the Torah portion and half portion are very similar. The building of the tabernacle was very detailed, just like the temple. Every part of the tabernacle and every object that went in had specific instructions and a purpose. Both buildings required many Israelites to come together and help build it. God uses his people, us, to perform incredible feats and build up his kingdom today. So I would challenge you, how are we as a community building God's temple today, and how are you building his temple? What are you doing to enrich your relationship with him? And are you chasing that purity and perfection? And so for today, we know that the temple and God's presence is now in us. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, "Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst?" So just like the temple and tabernacle were built by others, we need others in our lives to build us up and encourage us. We cannot do it alone. We need a community. And for me, that's you guys. That's this church. It's my family. And so just as the temple was promised to Solomon, the temple is promised to us. And we can, in our own sin and disobedience, walk away from the Lord and turn away from him. But he gives us that promise that he will never leave us or forsake us. And so kind of just for me and applying this portion to my life, God wants our temples to be pure, so what are we allowing to enter? And this Haftarah portion was a good reminder to me to question and pray about the things that I allow into my life, my temple. Since God had instructions and a purpose for everything that he allowed into the temple, I should do the same for me. And so that's just looked like praying and questioning the movies I watch, the music I listen to, even like the relationships and conversations I have. And it's just a quick prayer asking the Lord, is this what you have for me? Is this what you have ordained for me? And is this allowed into my temple? So it's something I've been taught before, but just in researching and preparing this teaching, it's helped it stick with me, and I do it daily now. And so to summarize, for you guys, God really cares about the detail. He wants our temples to be pure. He cares about what we allow into our temple. It is important to question and pray about everything we consume. I know I'm like preaching to the choir here, but it's just a good reminder. And we don't want to allow anything into our temple that God has not ordained. All right, thank you guys.